Hello, truth seekers. Welcome to our channel of psychological mysteries, where we unravel the threads of the known and venture into the abyss of the unknown. Imagine yourself in a situation where you are ordered to harm another person. Would you obey or resist? This question brings us to the intriguing concept of obedience to authority, a trait that is deeply ingrained in us from a young age. Surely you remember those days when you were told to respect your elders, obey your teachers, and follow the rules. These lessons were not taught to us in vain. They serve as the bedrock of societal order, enabling communities to function harmoniously. However, there's a darker side to this obedience. It's a side that can sometimes lead individuals to act against their moral principles. You see, when authority is in the picture, we often find ourselves surrendering our judgment. This surrender is not always conscious, and may happen even when the orders given conflict with our personal ethics. Think about soldiers on the battlefield, following orders that may result in the loss of innocent lives. Or consider employees in a company asked to partake in unethical practices for the sake of the business. In these situations, the line between right and wrong becomes blurry, and obedience to authority takes precedence over personal morality. This phenomenon is not limited to extreme circumstances. In our everyday lives, we may find ourselves following orders, conforming to societal norms, or adhering to rules that we don't necessarily agree with. Why? Because authority commands obedience. It wields a power that can compel individuals to act in ways that they wouldn't under normal circumstances. But why does this happen? How can authority exert such a powerful influence over us? To answer these questions, psychologists have conducted numerous studies throughout the years. One of the most famous among these is a classic experiment from the 1960s, an experiment that shook the foundations of our understanding of obedience and authority, an experiment that forced us to reevaluate our notions of right and wrong, of free will and coercion. To explore this further, we delve into a classic psychological experiment from the 1960s. In 1961, a psychologist named Stanley Milgram conducted a groundbreaking experiment at Yale University. This wasn't just any ordinary experiment. It was a deep dive into the human psyche and our relationship with authority. Stanley Milgram, a psychologist hailing from the city that never sleeps, New York, was deeply affected by the atrocities committed during the Second World War. He had a burning question. Could it be that the Nazis were merely following orders, even when those orders went against their personal morals and ethics? This question led him to Yale University, a prestigious institution known for its academic rigor and drive for innovation in research. In the heart of Yale, Milgram set out to examine the willingness of individuals to obey orders that conflicted with their personal morals and ethics. His objective was clear. He wanted to uncover how far people would go to obey an authority figure, even if it meant causing harm to another human being. His experiment was designed to push the boundaries of obedience and authority, to test the limits of individual conscience in the face of commands from those in power. The context was the early 60s, a time when obedience to authority was highly valued and rarely questioned. It was an era of conformity, where individuality often took a back seat to societal norms and expectations. Milgram's experiment was seen as controversial, even radical for its time. Yet, he was undeterred. He believed that the results of his work could shed light on some of the darkest corners of human behavior. As we delve deeper into the Milgram experiment, remember that this was more than just a study. It was a mirror held up to society, forcing us to confront the uncomfortable truth about our relationship with authority and the lengths we might go to obey. Let's now discover what exactly the Milgram experiment entailed. The setup of the Milgram experiment was clever yet simple. At its core, the experiment involved three roles: a teacher, a learner, and an experimenter. Each role was crucial to the unfolding of the study. The teacher, the actual subject of the experiment, was an everyday individual, unknowing of the real intentions of the study. They were led to believe that they were assisting in a scientific investigation of memory and learning. The learner, on the other hand, was an actor, privy to the experiment's real motive. They were tasked with pretending to be a volunteer, supposedly another participant, who would be learning a set of paired words. Finally, the experimenter, a stern and authoritative figure, was the one who explained the procedure to the teacher, ensuring that they understood their role in the experiment. The learning task was presented as a simple memory exercise. The teacher would read out pairs of words, and the learner was supposed to remember them. If the learner made a mistake in recalling the pairs, the teacher was instructed to administer an electric shock, with the voltage increasing with each subsequent error. Now here's the twist. The learner was rigged to provide wrong answers intentionally, prompting the teacher to deliver shocks. The shocks were, of course, fake, but the teacher didn't know this. They genuinely believed they were causing pain to the learner, as evidenced by the actor's convincing expressions of discomfort and pleas for mercy. It's essential to note that the teacher was free to withdraw from the experiment at any time. However, if they expressed a desire to stop, the experimenter would urge them to continue, using a series of verbal prods escalating in severity. This setup, in its deceiving simplicity, was designed to test the limits of obedience, to see how far individuals would go in obeying orders that conflicted with their personal morals and ethics. Now let's delve into the chilling sequence of events. The experiment began innocently enough, with a simple learning task. Our teachers were seated in front of an imposing shock generator, its switches labeled with voltage levels starting from 15 volts, all the way up to a terrifying 450 volts. The task was straightforward and on the surface harmless enough. The learner, strapped to a chair in an adjacent room, would attempt to memorize a list of word pairs. For every mistake, the teacher would administer an electric shock, with each subsequent error leading to an increase in the shock's intensity. As the experiment commenced, the learner, an actor in on the experiment, dutifully began reciting the word pairs. Predictably, mistakes were made, and with each error, the teacher was prompted to pull the lever, sending a jolt of electricity into the learner. The first few shocks were met with little more than grunts of discomfort from the learner. However, as the intensity increased, so did the severity of the learner's reactions. Soon the grunts turned into pleas for mercy, distressing cries punctuating the sterile silence of the lab. The learner began to complain about his heart condition, his voice filled with fear and apprehension. Yet the teacher was instructed to persist, to continue the shocks despite the apparent distress. The authority figure, the experimenter in the lab coat, assured them that they bore no responsibility for the consequences. As the shocks escalated, the learners' pleas grew more desperate, their cries more heart-wrenching. The teachers, now visibly uncomfortable and distressed, were torn. Their natural empathy clashed with their obedience to authority, their faces etched with concern. They turned to the experimenter, seeking some form of reprieve, only to be met with the firm instruction to continue. The teachers were caught in a moral tug-of-war. On one side, their inherent sense of compassion screaming at them to stop. On the other, the insistent, commanding voice of authority, pushing them to continue. This was the crux of Milgram's experiment, a stark showcase of the power of authority and the extent to which individuals are willing to obey, even when such obedience goes against their moral compass. The teachers, ordinary individuals like you and me, found themselves inflicting hypothetical harm on another human being, propelled by the forceful current of obedience. This was the chilling reality that Milgram's experiment unveiled, the unsettling ease with which individuals could be driven to commit acts of harm under the guise of obedience. But what happened when the teachers hesitated to continue? The answer to that question, my friends, lies at the heart of the Milgram experiment and is a testament to the unnerving power of authority. Faced with the learner's distress, many teachers expressed a desire to stop the experiment. They were caught in an ethical dilemma, their personal beliefs wrestling with the authoritative voice of the experimenter. It's a dilemma we often find ourselves in, isn't it? The struggle between what we believe is right and what we're told to do. The experimenter in Milgram's study was not a passive observer. Rather, he actively prodded the teachers, stating that they must continue. He assured them that they were not responsible for any harm inflicted upon the learner. The experimenter bore the weight of the consequences, or so he said. And this, dear listeners, is where things started to go south. Despite the learner's apparent pain and their own moral reservations, an astonishing number of teachers continued to follow the experimenter's instructions. They pushed past their comfort zones, pushed past the pleas of the learner, and administered the shocks. The experimenters' reassurances were like a lighthouse in a storm, guiding them through the chaos of their own ethical quandaries. Among the teachers, 65% administered the experiment's final massive 450-volt shock. Many were visibly distressed and uncomfortable, yet they continued. They obeyed the authority, even when it clashed with their personal morals. It's a chilling thought, isn't it? To think that obedience can override our own sense of right and wrong. But let's not be too hasty in our judgment. The teachers were not heartless individuals. On the contrary, they were ordinary people, much like you and me. They were caught in a complex web of obedience and authority, their actions driven by the belief that they were contributing to the greater good of science. The experimenter's constant assurance of his responsibility for any harm done also played a significant role in their continued obedience. The results of the Milgram experiment offer a stark insight into the human psyche. They reveal our propensity to obey authority, even when it conflicts with our own moral compass. It's a sobering reminder of the power of authority and the lengths we are willing to go when absolved of personal responsibility. But remember, this experiment was conducted under very specific conditions, and the participants were not truly inflicting harm. While it provides valuable insights, it doesn't define who we are or what we're capable of. It serves as a mirror, reflecting a part of our nature that we might not be comfortable acknowledging. The Milgram experiment is a testament to the complex and often conflicted nature of human behavior. It's a reminder that we are shaped not just by our personal morals and beliefs, but also by the social structures and authorities that surround us. The results of the Milgram experiment were both shocking and enlightening. They compel us to reflect, to question, and to strive for a better understanding of ourselves and the world around us. The Milgram experiment revealed disturbing truths about human nature and obedience. Now, let's delve into the implications of these revelations. The experiment's findings shook the psychological world to its core, presenting a jarring image of human morality. It demonstrated that ordinary individuals, people just like you and me, could be led to commit harmful acts if instructed by an authority figure. It's a sobering thought that shatters the comforting illusion of our inherent goodness. This experiment, in a way, holds a mirror to society, reflecting our susceptibility to authority and how it can warp our moral compass. The implications stretch far beyond the confines of a laboratory, seeping into everyday scenarios. Think about it. How often do we mindlessly obey orders at work, at school, or in other social settings, without questioning the morality of these directives? This is not to say that obedience is inherently bad, but it does underscore the importance of maintaining ethical vigilance. However, the ethical concerns aren't restricted to the experiment's results alone. The experiment itself has come under scrutiny. Critics argue that it was fundamentally unethical to put participants under such psychological distress. The participants were deceived, manipulated into believing they were inflicting pain on others. The mental anguish they experienced was real and profound, raising questions about the moral boundaries of psychological research. Yet, others contend that the experiment's shock value was necessary to unearth the unsettling realities of human obedience. They argue that the knowledge gained outweighs the ethical breaches, as it has significantly shaped our understanding of human behavior and influenced subsequent research. The debate rages on, but one thing is clear: the Milgram experiment has left an indelible mark on the field of psychology and on our collective consciousness. It's a potent symbol of our vulnerability to authority and the moral quandaries that can arise from it. The Milgram experiment serves as a potent reminder of the power of authority and the moral dilemmas it can impose. So, what can we take away from the Milgram experiment? Firstly, the experiment highlighted the astonishing power of authority and how it can compel individuals to act in ways that conflict with their personal ethics. The setup, a simple yet ingenious test of obedience, showed that under the weight of authority, many of us may cross lines we'd never dream of crossing otherwise. Secondly, the results were a wake-up call to the psychological community and beyond. A staggering 65% of participants obeyed the instructions to administer what they believed were harmful shocks. This threw a spotlight on the potential for authority to manipulate behavior, even in ordinary, everyday people. Lastly, the ethical and psychological implications of the experiment are profound. It forces us to question our own actions, our obedience, and the power dynamics at play in our lives. It's a stark reminder that the authority we yield to should never override our individual conscience and morality. Remember, the power of authority is immense, but so is the power of individual conscience and morality. We hope you enjoyed today's little dose of the unknown to stimulate your day. Please don't forget to share, like, and subscribe.